Well, good afternoon, everybody. And we are once again going to find out what's really going on in the world and what we have to be afraid of. Because anything that's crawling around in my world, in my neighborhood, in the shadows, I am just getting fearful of everything. But with us today is Robert Mills, and he is going to sort out things people believe, but just ain't so. And that's his show, and that's what he does. And Robert, how you doing today?
Fantastic, Randy. I just raced back from doing a history tour in San Francisco this afternoon because I look forward to being with you so much. And uh, led some Germans and some New Yorkers around the city of San Francisco, gave them the history. It's a fun thing. If you're ever in San Francisco City Guides, we have we have a 350 we 116 tours about the city, all free and given by 350 guides. We're all volunteer local people, just like to
Wow.
share the city with people.
How do they find
Uh,
out about that? Do you have an office that you work out of, all online, or how do they queue
well,
up to go do that?
my wife discovered it, and I went on a couple of them, and I thought, wow, this is great, And so one of the guides said to me, why don't you do this? So I applied, and they took me. It's a training process, and and so I lead two tours now. American history in Golden Gate Park. It's about American history, that the monuments there, and then the other is a gold rush tour downtown where it started in San Francisco. And I also do the private group tours, which are, we'll give a tour to anybody who has 20 people, pay $20 each. And you just tell us what tour it is, we'll do it out. And so I lead those. I just led a group of teenagers from Kyoto, Japan, who wanted to tour about the internment. So that was a little sticky. And then I did another one with MBAs from Zurich, Switzerland. They wanted to have a tour of the startup in San Francisco, when my kids are in that. So I took them to real startups, and they got to meet founders and all that. They were
Wow.
over the moon. It was really fun.
You
So
can't take
it's
them to Silicon Valley and have them hand out $20 bills to the kids as they tour up there and things like that.
well, there's plenty of that. The San Francisco is this little tiny city. It's 46 square miles. I mean, you can walk across it and stroll across it in 2 hours. And it is the home of 250 unicorns. That's companies that went from startups that were worth nothing to $1 billion in 25 years. That's more than China and 17 European countries in
Wow.
this little tiny, and it has 100% of the patents for the low Earth orbit making of drugs you can only make in zero G. And between, San Francisco and the Bay Area communities inside of it, they have essentially 100% of the patents for AI in the whole world. I mean, it's just unbelievable what's happening here. And San Francisco and Palo Alto and Berkeley, Stanford and UC Berkeley, are responsible for one out of every seven Nobel Prizes ever in all fields. I mean, it's just a powerhouse. It wasn't just television invented there, but it was in fortune cookies and Murphy beds in um, cocktails. Martinis were invented in San Francisco. Where would the world be? But also, the smartphones and computers and uh, Google and all. It was invented right within sight of San Francisco. So this incredible area. It's the richest place in the world. It's 37% of the people here have a master's degree or higher. The GDP per capita in San Francisco is almost 400,000. Nothing in the world like it. And the irony is, I mean, not to say it's all great stuff. I mean, north of here, if you go, there's this huge realm area north of say the wine country up to the Oregon. It's as big as South Carolina, and it's the poorest place in the whole United States now.
Hmm.
It's poorer than the West Virginia. It's the new poverty because all the businesses, all the industry up there, fishing, timber, mining, uh, the cattle, it's all collapsed, and so there's nothing people to do in that whole region. It's next to the richest place in the world, and so um, it's an irony, and the Bay Area is struggling as well because San Francisco laid itself out in these beautiful neighborhoods, and then all these jobs came in, and there was no housing for them. It's surrounded on three sides by water, And so prices went up, way up. And the only way to fix that is to go tear up some of those neighborhoods and put high-rise, apartment buildings, and that's not politically feasible. So the area struggled with some of these things that coming with rapid change. And But it's still an amazing place. I live in Marin County. And it's three-quarters of it is parks and recreational areas, national monuments, watersheds, all preserved forests. You can go out and ride your bike for 30 miles in wilderness and see lakes and forests and stuff. And right here within sight of the towers of San Francisco.
Well,
So
I'm sure that all of the problems that you have are going to be solved with the new tariffs that are being placed around the
oh,
world. There'll be factories galore because obviously people, you have the workforce there that are going to go in and sit down and put together Nike shoes and bikes and things like that. And it's going to happen by the fall. I mean, it's going to be right after autism is solved and a lot of other magical things are happening. And I heard that Governor Newsom, your governor today, decided that he's going to file a few lawsuits because the tariffs apparently are going to hurt California very, very, very
no.
badly. And he is, you're probably going to have, you're probably going to have to be annexed by Canada, if I had to guess, and then be
We'd like to
overtaken.
join Canada. If we had our way, we in California, we'd join Canada.
It's
But
did you ever
so
notice that everything is upside down right now? I mean, it's like nothing, it's 1938 Hitler's Germany. And I heard today, I'm going to give you one more fact that the books that were pulled out of the Pentagon, things that were pertaining to DEI or, just any Tuskegee flyers, they no longer have any merit. However, books that were left at the Pentagon were copies of Mein Kampf. Now, true story, can't make that up. True
you
story.
can't make that up.
No.
I think, Randy, that when the story is finally told, that this tariff notion will go down in history is the stupidest thing that any leader of any nation has ever done in the history of the world. And there's a lot of competition for that distinction. And I mean, first of all, we gave up the manufacturing stuff because we wanted to. I mean, manufacturing jobs are polluting and they're low paying. And that's why they went to China. And you go to Chinese cities, you can hardly see, but you can look at the sun like the moon here because it's covered, the sky's covered in yellow clouds of pollution. And
And
what
to
we
that
actually,
and to that point, my son, when he was going to University of Wisconsin to learn how to speak Chinese, spent 2 summers in Tianjin in China through the University of Wisconsin. And he would we actually talked more when he was in China because I just wanted to make sure he was there every day. But he would open up the window, and some days it was clear, and some days you couldn't see across the street. I mean, the pollution was just so heavy, just
one of the
incredible.
things there's all this discussion going on about manufacturing jobs, okay? And a couple of things about that. Number one is that AI is just about to wipe all of it out. I mean,
Yeah,
huge swaths of. I mean, my son is he said a lot of the coders, their jobs are going to be wiped out. Paralegals, all kinds of semi-professional jobs wiped out by AI, and all these manufacturing jobs. I mean, they're just going to be wiped out. So you might bring the factories where the robots will work back here,
exactly.
but you're not going to
If
bring these.
you're a robot repairman, you might
Yeah,
have a job in the new
might
economy.
have a job. Nobody
Yeah,
else will. And the other thing about this that is astonishing to me is that we keep talking about manufacturing and as if that's the whole story. What about the service job? What about the service industry? That's what we took over. We said, you take the manufacturing to third world countries. We'll do the low polluting, high paying, attractive service industry jobs. I mean, the United States gets 62 billion a year from the university students that come here. That's more than the oil and gas we export. I mean, you go down the list of things, look at Google and Facebook and Amazon, and you just go down this long list of computers, Apple. We dominate the world. We get a ton of money from that, way more than the manufacturing. Nobody's talking about it. It's pollution free. The cash comes in. Why wouldn't we want to dominate that and let them have those polluting jobs that are not going to exist much longer? And the reason they pay the poor workers in China a pittance, to pay the workers here and to meet the industry standards, the treatment of them and the pollutions and all that stuff would cost so much more that it's just a pipe dream, which we don't even want to do, but it's so unrealistic and so ignorant that it just, from the day it was announced, all the experts, all the people who write about this, people who do, and I've listened to a bunch of them, and they're all scratching their head and saying, what? What did he say? What is he doing? And they asked, what's the plan? And this, no one can come up with a coherent, how this is going to work.
Well,
Um,
if I could just interject, remember, he doesn't know how to plan. He would have to think, he would literally have to think and read maybe somebody else's plan, you know? And the reason that he accepted this 2025 plan or whatever it was,
Project
it,
2025,
I'm sorry?
Project
Yeah.
2025.
The reason he did is that he never read it. He doesn't read anything. They can't even get
No,
him to read in the morning when they're brought in the special assessment of what's going on around the world.
this is the one page, and they still couldn't get him to read it.
They reduced it down back in his first term to a coloring book. You might want to pay attention to North Korea today because they're firing an atomic bomb. Nah, I don't care. I mean, to get him up and so when it came to tariffs, that he doesn't still understand that those countries aren't paying the tariffs. And by the way, when he immediately announced the tariffs going against Canada and they were enacted, the people that did business with me from Canada canceled all their business immediately
Right.
because they're so angry and wiped out, a chunk of my business within minutes. And not because of me, not because of anything else, but because they're passionately angry at, the United States and to our president. And
I
we
was
also, I'm
good.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and when you sit and you take a look at you just go through the litany and the list of the damage that tariffs are creating. Travel is the third or fourth largest industry that we have in the United States. And a lot of people in the summer plan on going to Europe. Well, right now, the Europeans are not happy seeing Americans. The travel aspect is falling off. The reservations are falling off. I Googled what it cost to go to Paris last week. I went to one of the major, here's where you can get your flight, your car, and your hotel. And for a week in Paris, it was $1,400, including your flight. Downtown, 2 blocks off Champs-Élysées. Who ever heard of prices like that? Well, it's because nobody's going. And because when you go there, people that I've talked to, the first question I have asked is, so you're still planning on going? Do you have any reservations? Well, certainly. All you have to do is read. And so there's a lot of stay-at-home vacations. So everything that he has touched, he has the un-Midas touch. It turns to rust and then it falls apart. And then he's just the I get a call every day from a passionate relative. I'll just leave it at that. And when you said and he said, "Hey, today, Dad, guy in Congress said, let's just cut to the chase. We're just going to call Earth Trump from now on. We're going to change the name, all the planets alignment. It'll be Mercury, Venus, Trump, Mars, and so forth, and just get on with it because that's where he's at. He is a soulless a dictator, authoritarian, ignorant human being that is causing damage to the world, just talking tariffs of which he doesn't understand. Doesn't understand that, let alone putting a red flag in front of the 9-0 vote of the Supreme Court saying, we sort of goofed up that guy down in, down there in that prison, but we're not going to do anything to bring him back because I guess I'm powerless. I mean, on the surface of that, I've given you enough food for a buffet, my friend. I am mystified, as are a lot of people, of what's going on in the world. And I will serve it up, the tennis ball, nice and light to you. Go. Give me your thoughts.
Well, for back to some follow up with some things you said. You know, Trump had a ghostwriter who wrote The Art of the Deal. He didn't write it.
Right.
Uh, and the ghostwriter worked with him for a time, you know, and the ghostwriter was appalled by him in all kinds of ways. And one of the things he said about him is he said, you know, he bragged to him, Trump bragged to this ghostwriter that he'd never read a book in his life. Now he had to read something to get through Wharton, but I mean, after that, or for entertainment or for knowledge, or he doesn't read, you know.
Hmm.
And then, of course, I think it's largely lost on people who he played on TV this, you know, on The Apprentice, that he pretended he was a success. He went bankrupt 6 times, and including a casino. How do you bankrupt a
You
casino? I mean,
can't. Yeah, that's
it's work. You know, it takes talent to
all
bankrupt
right.
a casino. And so we have this tariff thing, and all the experts are saying it can't possibly work. Um, and you know, I listened to Ezra Klein the other night. You know, he was doing a podcast with these experts, and they were talking about the ways in which um, this whole thing is playing into China's hands, all kinds of ways. You know, and number two is how right now, as we talk, all over the world, countries are restructuring their trade lines, their assembly lines, their service lines, their you know, the trading you know, pipelines to avoid the United States and to cut us out and to do trading with each other and outside the U.S. and not cross in here at all. And you know, we've told them we can't be relied on. They're not going to soon forget that they slap with these huge tariffs out of nowhere with no reason. And it's one of the things that they're saying to people, these other countries, these leaders, is we don't even know what he wants. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
he's not saying, "Okay, you sign this, and I'll." But speaking of signing things, we you know, I want to go over and I want to talk about. You know, in the New York Times yesterday, on the front page, they published the letter that the Trump administration wrote to Harvard, and the letter that Harvard wrote back. And I tell you that, you know, if you couldn't make this up, if you had said that somebody was going to do this, you know, before, I would say, nah. But what Trump, the administration, demanded of Harvard is that Harvard basically just turn over its complete sovereignty and control and independence to Trump, and to allow him to set the standards, do the admissions of students and the standards, to decide which faculty to hire, and all kinds of requirements for ideological. And they want to impose what they're calling viewpoint diversity. And they want to hire somebody to come and make Harvard faculty have evidence of that is, and change the hiring around and let people go until they have, quote, viewpoint diversity. Which interesting, they use that word, which they've been against and ranting about with DEI and everything. We're getting rid of, which they saw as a code word for white men having to give up jobs to women and minorities, was what DEI was, the threat of it. But you're talking about viewpoint diversity, not the marketplace of ideas. You know, does that mean we're going to have to put astrologists in there in the astronomy department, and anti-vaxxers in the medical school, and you know, I mean, what viewpoint diversity you're going to have? As many Republicans on the faculty. I mean, and the other thing is that the money that they're taking from the university in Harvard, you look at where that money was going.
All right.
That money is not going to pay its staff and salaries and run the university. They've got billions of dollars in endowments. That money that they took away was running the Children's Research Medical Center to save children's lives from diseases.
All right.
And across the country, all these research centers doing research and testing drugs and new procedures and treatments of diseases of all types, and protections and vaccines and all that's what's getting cut, and into knowledge and products and future stuff that would give the United States the edge it's long had. And and one of our big advantages has been our soft power inviting students, the $56 billion a year in tuition from students all over the world who come here to go to school, fall in love with America, meet us, have a positive view of us, can understand us. That's enormous soft power that gives us this advantage in the world that China is just leaping to take that over. That's why they can never compete with us. And now Trump has just given it to them. And also, they're moving, they're the only alternative in many of these markets. So people think, well, it's either, China said, we'll do it for no tariffs. We'll help you. They're going to choose China over us. And Trump has said, that they're our big geopolitical threat. China is our number one enemy
Right.
and competitor. And what he's done is he's served up on a silver platter, their ability to beat us on 80 ways from Sunday, and they're talking about manufacturing jobs. What about AI? I mean, that's the future. And
Right.
we want to bring back steel making, I mean, it's astonishing. And then this poor guy, he talked about Garcia, that the poor kid that was sent back to this gulag in El
Mhm.
Salvador, and the administration, the judge in the case, the attorneys for the administration, show up at this hearing, and the judge says, what's the basis for your holding him? And his lawyers say he didn't do anything. He's innocent. He's got a green card. There's no basis, and he was ordered not to be, what's the administration's, response to all that? And the judge, I mean, the lawyer for the Justice Department says, I don't have any job. Ask my wife, my client. I mean, this is the answer that under ethics rules for lawyers, you have to zealously advocate for your client, but the law is very clear. All the ethics rules in the 50 states say that have this thing called candor to the tribunal. That's an ethics thing. There's a whole bunch of subcategories, all of it, which basically says you have to tell the truth to the judge. You can't lie to a judge or an arbitrator or the other. You can't lie. You have to tell the truth. You have to be candid. You can't mislead. You can't cite authority that's wrong on purpose. You have to be honorable, and you have to tell the truth. And so they fired this guy today. By the way, and he had been removed from his duties because he did not, zealously enough advocate. Well, what does that mean? I mean, they wanted to lie to the judge.
Right.
The administration has not been able to say what did he say or not. What did he not say that he should have said that got him fired? And so today, this is two judges moving on contempt here, and this judge Nis she is now initiating, and Boasberg is also initiating contempt proceedings, and both of them have ruled. She ruled today that the administration has not advanced any facts whatsoever to show the administration done anything to bring this guy back. They were ordered to, quote, facilitate. So the first they played word games with that, and they dragged their feet, and they did it. And now they're just flat out saying, we can't do it. And here's the president of El Salvador, is a notorious dictator, and he's there, smoozing with in the Oval Office, and all Trump had to do is, everybody knows, he's pretending I can't ask him, and the dictator is pretending he can't. He said, how can I smuggle him in? Smuggle him in, all you have to do is just hand him,
Right.
the administration has already said if he shows up at a port, they'll let him in. So that was just a completely ham-fisted answer, if there ever was one.
Not
So
that they orchestrated that behind the closed doors before they got to that microphone, because they knew that was going to be asked, and they had the discussion,
botched it.
you
I mean,
know.
they completely botched the answer by showing that that there is no, and the judges today are both saying, that this is a game. You're saying I can't ask for it. There was the whole cabinet was there. They could have said, "Can you send this guy back? Would you please send him back?" That's facilitating, and he would have said, "Sure." He couldn't have said, "Well, how am I going to get him? I'm smuggling back in." They're saying, "Send him, please. We'll send a plane for him."
Yeah.
And
Well,
so that's
Marco Rubio, who has become the weakest pallbearer in the carrying the Trump casket. I mean, here's a guy that hated Trump before he got elected, and now he just waffles on everything. And he goes, he did one of those when they asked about the scenario down there. He gave one of those Fagazi. I don't know. Maybe so. I don't think there's anything we can
I thought
do.
it just, I mean, this is this game playing. But
Yeah.
Trump goes on TV and with cameras rolling and says, it says to this dictator, I want to send Americans there, only of course the convicted ones, but I want to send Americans who to this gulag and I mean, you can't, under the Constitution, there's no basis ever has been, and it isn't now, to send an American outside the United States, where he's out, there's no jurisdiction. You can't do that. He's saying that right now publicly, So um, where's the pushback on this? I mean, and across the board, it's very disheartening to me to see, the Republicans acting like lick spittles and just saying nothing when this is not America. This is not what we stand for. This is not what the law is. So the two judges now who have this Garcia case have teed it up um, and the others who are down there without due process for a Supreme Court confirmation that Boasberg is very, very, very good. Both of them have been. He did a 46-page order that just really lays it all out, and he's carefully framing it so that it comports with the Supreme Court, what they said, what they, it's all teed up for them, where it's just indisputable that his orders are being defied. And so it's going to come to this constitutional crisis. Now, Trump has said that he will go along with the Supreme Court. He may not, he said he probably wouldn't go along with the district courts, but he said he would go along with the Supreme Court, which he said he respects. Well, we're going to see, because this is going to the Supreme Court and it's teed up so that it's almost inconceivable that the Supreme Court could not order him to release this guy, to facilitate, meaning they have to ask for it, and they didn't, and they haven't, so there's criminal contempt. So we're coming to a huge showdown on this very soon, and it's being teed up right now to bring us to that. But across the board on all this, including they snatched a couple more teenagers today and yesterday that had no record. They were legally in the United States. They didn't do anything wrong. They would just snatch these teenagers, and they snatch them and put them in planes and send them off to El Salvador, and without due process, in violation of these court orders saying you can't do that. And even the Supreme Court unanimously, they took pains in that order, unanimous, all 9 of them. There must be due process. They take these kids, young women, 18 years old, and put them in a plane for no reason and send them off to El Salvador. Well, this is something that there's one direct line through this since the first administration of the Trump administration of separating parents. Is cruelty.
Right.
I mean, there's so much cruelty, intentional, unnecessary, gratuitous, horrid cruelty. And I mean, these people go to work who are medical researchers in the federal government, in these agencies, and 10,000 of them show up, and they got wives and families and careers, and they have mortgages and kids in college, and they go there and their key doesn't work because they have to learn on the internet. Nobody even has the courtesy overnight or when they show up to say, "Hey, guess what? You're fired." They just let them just come to work and the key doesn't work. That's how they figure out they're fired. And I mean, that's just such a cruel. They could pay them severance. I mean, even if you wanted to do this horrible thing you can't do of just usurping Congress, and Congress is just laying there doing nothing. And in all prior events where there was against Nixon tried to impound money that Congress had appropriated. And the Congress leaped to its feet and said, "No, you can't do that." And they stood up for the institution of Congress. And this
Right.
happens several times throughout history. This time, he says, well, I'm not gonna, I'm closing that agency, and I'm not gonna do this, and I'm firing all these people, and I'm not gonna spend. That's just directly in violation of prior Supreme Court precedent and prior history and prior of what the Congress has done. So the only branch that's ready, that's capable at this point of putting a stop to this Supreme Court and the judiciary, and we're going to the district court judges have gotten nowhere. So we're going to have to see what happens with that. But across the board, in every one of these instances, you can cite, how they separate families and how they have just the way they've talked to people, the way they've handled people. It's cruelty. Cruelty is the reason they do it this way, and not. And what's shocking to me and disheartening is how this it's not creating in the mega world. They're not saying, wait a minute, this is not who we are. We don't treat people like this. This is gratuitous. Why are we treating this way? Even if she's a was an immigrant, she's here legally. We changed the law. There's supposedly 14 million illegals here. If she's illegal, that's one thing. Okay, that's one thing. Give them due process. There's no objection to that because there can't be. But they're not doing that. They're just taking people for whom there is nothing and taking away their due process and throwing them. But the underlying thing here is that throughout the Republican universe, there's no pushback to all this stuff. He's doing all this trashing and all this, you and I've talked about this. Every organization, big and small, and new and old, can use some rethinking and reimagining. There's an enormous industry in the United States that does this. We call it consulting. My daughter, as I told you, is in that. And these the Boston Consulting, and Bain, BAI and Bain, and what's the other, the big one? It's a huge industry now, growing, and they have all these MBAs from elite Ivy League universities, and they go on. They're hired by companies, big and small, old and new, and they sit down with them and they say, let's see how we can reimagine your company, how we can slim it down, how we can reallocate the resources, how we can rethink your priorities and your ways of showing your, quantifying your progress. And they charge a lot of money for this, and it works so well. And these companies make so much money after these people have been there and done that they have them back. And my daughter does this, and she was out in Raleigh, North Carolina, with a bunch of startup bros there and some new company, and I have a picture of her with 40 young men around her, and this one woman, and they want her back because she's able to sit down with them and say, let's figure out how we can save money here and how we can make more money here, and just doing all this magic that they do them and do it works. Now, you and I've talked about all they have to do with the federal government, which has got all the $7 trillion, is sit down and do the same magic with them. But you don't do it with somebody, a ketamine addict waving a chainsaw around. You sit down with them and you say, okay, let's look at this. What's the point here? Is this person enough for this? Do you need more? Do you need less? Can we take this person and move it over here? They go through there and they just reimagine and reorganize these companies. And it works like a charm. And they were able to enormously increase the profits and cut down the cost. And it works. And so we have this industry that we are the number one in the world in. And instead of bringing that industry over to the federal government and say, okay, go to work here, see if you can whack off $1 trillion and increase the productivity. Now, the federal government is different than a corporation, and that needs to be kept in mind here. The purpose of the corporations make money. The purpose of government is to serve the people that, and it's different. And with Social Security, you might be able to make the process more efficient, but the goal is not to cut Social Security, that people have paid for. So this opportunity, which is it's really sad to me that is such an opportunity here, to go in and reorg in an enlightened way, a way that will work, the way that will achieve the goals and do it for less money. and do it better. You could easily do that. But what do? They send this crazed guy who's acts like he's on high on ketamine, and they send him in to just and he brings in all these acolytes who just chop every which way. They don't even know what they have to go back and rehire a lot of them. They cut the people out that were doing the nuclear codes. They put tariffs on islands that are uninhabited only by penguins. I mean, they don't know what they're doing. They're just in there with a hatchet, a chopping away without any effort. And so what it's going to do and what they're doing across the board, it's going to take a while for the damage that you and I've talked about to manifest itself in ways that really are in the face of the
Well,
voters.
I think Senator Grassley in Iowa had a town hall meeting. I think it was yesterday.
I
Uh,
saw it.
he didn't go well for him.
No,
They don't want the Republicans out there to do town hall meetings because they're confronted by their constituents, and they don't go well. I mean, they forget that percentage of people in the middle moves from right to left, left to right, right to left. People are fed up with this stuff, and then the thing that just blows it just sets my hair on fire is the denials of occasionally I'll turn on Fox News to see what they're talking about. And I listened to it for half an hour the other day. None of the topics of these topics, of course, surface, but they'll spend 20 minutes talking about a fire on a cargo ship, unnamed, and say, well, we'll be right back to cover more of this, just to fill up their time, because they don't want to cover these obvious spots. And then when they ask the president's press secretary about these judges, well, it's not that the judges are right, that they'll demean the judge by saying, well, the judges doesn't have the power to override, the president's legal authority to sit and make these laws. I mean, they demean these judges that are, their hair has to be on fire, and they just discount everything. I mean, when it comes to you talk about causing trouble, when it used to be in the world, there'd be a hurricane or disaster somewhere, they'd always look to the Americans to fly in with the planes, off of our ships at sea to bring in water supplies, whatever we could. But now in the Sudan, we have warehouses full of food. And this again was in a display. A congressman the other day said, all we have to do is fund the opening of these warehouses for food because children are starving hundreds of yards away, and how their measurement of nearly dead is that they take a piece of paper about that big and wrap it around the bicep of a child, and if it's under 4.5 inches around their bicep, they're going to die, and the food's sitting yards away. But because of Doge, they closed that office. They didn't fund and let the people sit there to get paid to open it up to give that food that is sitting there. And now instead of going and supporting disasters in the world, like you said, it's just being cruel,
just
and inhuman. And it does so much to just hurt us. He doesn't understand that it shows the power and strength of our country doing all of these things, that now China and Russia and Iran and whoever can is going to step in to be the savior of what they can to make it an impact around the world. And we're going to go back, and let's say the next president comes in and it's one we favor, and whoever that might be want to go and make amends. It's gone. It's like your significant other who you loved in high school, and you find out she's cheating on you. Well, you know what? It might not be going back down that road. It's, the world is looking to, as you said, form all these other paths because they can't rely on us. They don't know. Like somebody was saying on the radio last week, is that you can sit and talk about these tariffs or, do all the infrastructure, but anybody putting money into new infrastructure doesn't know who's going to be elected a year from now in the midterms. They don't know who's going to be elected in the next presidential election, and then the midterms after that, and the next presidential election. And it takes years to build if some fantasy, you have something that can be built putting people back to work, which we know robots are going to take over. It's going to be very difficult to have any business building factories to put people back to work. It is just such a fantasy. It's 10 years away. It's not going to happen this next year. And you're not going to open up the old micro switch offices in Freeport, Illinois, and fill them up with people building tennis shoes. It's just not going to happen.
That's
And
right.
somehow our country still has what show has the best ratings in the country? Fox. Far above and beyond anything that is being watched by anybody. How,
It's
tell
having
me,
enormous impact, enormous
tell me how still today people that voted for Trump look at him now and go, yeah, he's still my guy.
That's
What?
because of Fox, you know. I mean, I turned on Fox when E. Jean Carroll had won that enormous judgment against him. Okay, and
Right,
this is a woman who was completely falsely accused. I mean, just made up stuff about her and ruined her life, and people threatened her, and she had to go hide. And so she goes to court and claims all this stuff about her, and she wins this gigantic judgment. And then she wins the second one. And Fox never covered any of it. I mean, you would never, if you watch Fox, you know, all the networks are alive with this. I mean, this president has been held accountable here for this enormous amount of money for wrongdoing. Nobody says a peep about it. I mean, Fox doesn't. I mean, Fox, you would not know anything about it. But you combine the civic ignorance and of our system, our schools are so awful. I mean, it's just getting worse. They plunged since start of COVID. That had a big thing, and then since then it's gone down. We are just people can't, these kids can't even read, you know, and
mm,
it's that is uh, a harbinger of things, a leading indicator in the future of the United States huge decline. I mean, because you know we need an educated populace, first of all, to be able to vote and to reason and think, which they can't do. And you know, and I see so many ways when people start talking about the vaccines and start talking about the election being so all that kind of stuff, it brings back this discussion you and I've had about Thales, you know, the Greek founder of philosophy 2,600 years ago. He said you find truth through reason and evidence.
right.
And that really set the world of modern science, and modern science has built this world. But as late as the 17th century, the church, you know, Galileo made this telescope and he looked up and he saw Venus and Mercury going through phases, which could not happen unless they had orbits inside of us around the sun. The church said, no, 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 the sun goes around the earth. That's what scripture says. Don't look in the telescope. Don't look in the, and they put Galileo in jail for life because he said, this is what you see, you know, the earth goes around the sun. No other explanation for it. He wrote a book about it and they threw him in jail. And but have we advanced beyond that? You know, here we are in this century, and people are like JFK Jr. are saying that vaccines cause autism. And you know, it's been debunked 100 times, you know, and so there's ways to determine this is a factual question. I mean, it's like, you know, what's the moon's surface made out of? You know, green cheese or titanium, or you know, I mean, you can go and you can look and you can bring it back and you can analyze it. I mean, it's a fact. Okay, you can see what the answer is, and you take people who had these vaccines and do they have autism? No, you look at the new cases of autism and you see, did those people get vaccinated? There's ways you could just shred it on the surface, but they're completely immune to facts and evidence and reason. And the same with the election. They show up with 60 lawsuits that went finally all the way to court. I mean, it was started with 300 something, and it went down just it finally got to court with 60, and the judge don't care what you got, nothing. And this Trump appointed judge in the Seventh Circuit said, you know, to win a lawsuit, you have to have facts and evidence on your side and law. You got none of that here, nothing. And did it change anything? No. You know, where is the, and I've never found anybody, even on my tours, who understands that there's 176,000 precincts in the 2020 election. Each one of them independent. Each one of them, you can only vote there if you live there, and you can only count the votes if you live there. And all the votes were counted in these things, and it was less, the average of 1,100 in each one. And how do you cheat in that? I would say, no, tell me you believe that.
What sets my hair on fire is that you can give people, like you said, you've had these discussions where you talk with people that are Trump, MAGA hat wearers, and you take them through logic and reason, and you try to explain to them the difference between commentary on television and people that have to actually protect, if you're going on MSNBC, typically there's some of them are lawyers, some of them are coming from universities. You have some very distinguished people in the morning that if they got on TV and they lied, they'd lose their job. I mean, you go back to Brian Williams years ago,
Yes,
who was an anchor who misstated some facts about Hillary Clinton getting off a plane and some bullets being fired and whatever, lost his job off
right.
a very short misstatement because it was just misstated. And when you have these newspapers, they have, you know, when they put things in the paper factually, they have to single, double, triple check facts before they try to anyway. But somehow the Trump people, even their press secretary, simply say, if you go to a Grassley town hall meeting, well, those are all paid actors. All of them, all paid actors, brought in by the Democrats to stir up this trouble. There's nobody really upset about what Trump is doing, and it's all paid, except Trump tells them don't have, public meetings anymore because it causes too much stress. Or you have Marjorie Taylor Greene 2 nights ago had the Gestapo basically, if you spoke up and out, you got arrested and let out the door. I mean, everything was, she wanted everybody to write questions down, but if she got to a question she didn't like, she would just demean the person that wrote the question. They find a way that people believe that if you go to what they call mainstream media, somehow that's all faked and because it goes against their model of what Trump stands for. But those people, as I've tried to explain to them, have to protect their careers. And the people, and I've had let's just sit down, let's just have a one-on-one. And one of my business associates is very Trump backed and been with him 15 years. And he just absolute still is on that path and a highly respected, intelligent guy. And even when it came to taking the COVID shot, he said, no, I'm not going to do it. Me and my wife are not going to do it. But I said, but yes. But the only problem is when I asked him 2 days ago, how did that go for you not taking the COVID shot? Well, my wife nearly died of COVID and I've had it 5 times. And they're living up in upper Wisconsin, out in the middle of nowhere, basically in a bunker and hard to run into people. But he does travel internationally sometimes. And he had COVID and nearly died, but his mind, he's not going to get, he doesn't want the COVID shot. This is so in my mind, and I'm sorry, so unreasonable is that I do not understand how people on Fox, when they go home at night and have to take a shower, how they really, if they don't, I mean, they're earning a tremendous amount of money, but how they go and look their family in the face and go, I know I'm destroying the country. Boy, the salary I'm making, man, it is outstanding, and people believe everything I'm saying. I don't get it.
You
For
know
the
what
life of me, I don't get it.
what we're witnessing in the United States, which is really horrifying to me, is the collapse of our dominant epistemology. Epistemology is how do you know what's true? And it's been reason and evidence, and you could look at the facts, and people would say, well, these facts show this, it was related. But along with this has come there's no more penalty for lying. If you catch somebody lying, like Trump lies every day, and then they correct it, they don't pay any penalty for that. Now,
No,
when they show this is a ball-faced lie, they just shrug, and Fox Fox went out and they smeared that poor Dominion Voting Systems company and put them out of business, making up stuff, saying it was coming from China, and they made all these things up. Well, they sued them and they collected a settlement of 787 million. And there's another one suing Fox, is going to come to trial this year. And so here you have these companies suing, winning, and showing it's a bald-faced lie. And Alex Jones of InfoWars gets sued for $1.5 billion successfully because he makes up this stuff about the non these the crisis actors, were the ones that pretended in that shooting, the school shooting. And and so it's shown to be a lie. And then as part of the settlement, he agrees to, he comes online and he says, I made it all up. It's a lie. And you ask people, is it true? And they still say it's true. So what we're seeing is and this is a thin line between madness and irrationality and insanity and following the facts and the law. And this country is veering off that, where people are believing things that ain't so. And when you show them that it isn't so, they just shrug and there's no penalty for it. In the past, as you pointed out, Brian Williams, and there's many, many other instances where if somebody in authority said something that wasn't true and it was shown not to be true, they suffered a huge diminution in their prestige. People would stop believing them. And that back in the 50s is even true of a lot of the scandal mongers and the gossip columnists. They had to be true for them to keep their job and be able to persuade
Right.
people. So today they can just make it up and no one seems to care. So there's this collapse of epistemology that true is not true anymore. And true is kind of what I want to believe and I enjoy, and it's kind of fun, and I don't care whether it's actually true or and so there's this complete collapse of the notion, and that's what epistemology is, the study of what is true. And it is now in the United States, it's undergoing a collapse where our paradigm, which has been scientific reason and evidence, is being cast aside for people just making stuff up. And people believe it because it's fun, or because they like them, or because Fox News says it's so, and whatever. And it's really going to take us, into some place where it's hard to say that. And it may
Well,
be
I'm going to cut you off right there because John Hyland today said the same thing. We've got about two
who
minutes left.
said that? Who
John
said that?
Heilman, John Heilman, he's on MSNBC in the morning, and
Okay.
he's on a couple of their MSNBC shows through the day, and well respected. And he said today, he said, when you take a look at Bernie Sanders and AOC, what they're doing, attracting these large crowds, and it was quite startling. And all I can do is paraphrase. He said, and I've listened to him many times. And he said today in a voice that was quivering, shocked, fearful, but adjusting. He was asked, what do we have to do to change this? And he said, it's nothing dissimilar from where authoritarian countries, like in Russia, where they had Navalny, who went back home. He was poisoned. He was in Germany. He was poisoned on a flight. He gets voluntarily flies back to Russia, knowing he's going to be arrested, tortured and died in jail. But he was head of a movement for freedom. And John Heilman said today, he said, what Bernie Sanders and AOC are doing, he said, we just have to do more because we're not into typical politics anymore. We're into an uprising. We have to think of what happened in other countries when authoritarianism came to that country. How did the so-called minority revolt and react to it? And it was very serious about it. And I guess I'm going to let you wrap up the last 2 minutes because that's about what we have. And then we have to end it. And I hope everybody that listens here drops a note. Go to our Live Eco Style website, our Facebook page, leave a note. You can find this Robert's show right on the front page of our Live Eco Style, easy to find. Go right there and you can plug it in. You can go to our Roku channels, again called Live Eco Style or Excited Minds Media. Go to a YouTube channel and you can find his own segment, Robert Mills segment, things people believe that just ain't so. It has its own now channel within our channel, but we want to hear what you have to say, and drop us a line or leave us a note. Go to you have so many different places you can leave notes, because we know, as a couple guys that are slightly over 25 years old, been around for a bit, and we've seen a lot of different administrations. We're both caring about this country. And Robert being an attorney for many years, and myself having experiences around the world, I find this one of the saddest times in my life, that I thought that after the wall in Berlin came down, we were going to have peace and our grandkids would have joyful lives, and that we would have a world that was finally settled. And right now we're leading the unsettlement of the world. And Robert, I'll leave the last minute and a half up to you, and then we got to have a hard stop because that's just all the time we have.
Okay, well, I encourage everybody to keep heart. It's not a done deal yet. It's the most crisis period in American history of the whole 240 years we've been, a functioning democracy. This is the worst crisis, and it's heading dark down. But it's not done yet, and we need to keep heart. We need to keep ourselves vigilant in it. We need to keep active. We need to reach out to other people, and we need to keep in mind that that we're not alone in this. He barely won a majority, and since then it's tailed off enormously. Elections are determined by this little piece in the middle, which is now a pretty big piece in the middle,
Right.
and if we just stay, focused on this and keep our sanity, reach out to our friends, participate, get involved. And ultimately, as the elections approach, you give money to the people, to the right people, and then go and ring doorbells and knock on doors. And if we all show up en masse and work together here, we can change things, because as this kicks in over the next year or so, all these horrible things they're going to come home to roost. We're going to have epidemics come back. We're going to have prices go up. We're going to have possible recession. We're going to have a lot of terrible things happen that are clearly going to be caused by Trump, and even some of his own supporters will turn. So we need to stay vigilant, stay involved, and try to be as optimistic as you possibly can in the meantime.
Well, Robert, I thank you for those words, and once again, look forward to next week. Let's keep the spirits up. I love your cheering America on, because I know you're rooted in the trying the ability to put the fire that my hair has been set on every week. And I love your education and background. And again, for Robert Mills, myself, Randy Weckerly, and our show, Things People Believe That Just Ain't So, we're trying to sort it all out. And you can find it on the Distillery Channel. Media LLC is where we have our copyright. And that stretches all the way back to 2015, all the way up to 2025. Can you believe that? So anyway, try to always leave a better footprint. That's what my grandfather said to do. And that beach you'll come back to next week will be a lot cleaner and better for your presence. Anyway, may the good Lord bless us and the United States of America. And Robert, thank you again. Randy Weckerly for Live Eco Style. Y'all have a good week. We'll be okay. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.